It is 5:30, and my voice is echoing. But I'd like to call this meeting of the Mayor's Neighborhood Safety Task Force to order. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Christopher Storr.
He's not here.
Marianne Downey. Here. Barbara Lewis. Samuel Johnson. Megan McGinty. Thomas Grimes. James Moreland.
Here.
Joel Pressing.
Here.
John Rosca. Teresa Michelson.
Here.
Kathy Wallage. Norma Linton. Here. Esther Pat. Here. Clyde Walker. Dave Barr. Jerry Moore.
No, I think Dave Barr probably gave up a long time ago.
Well, he retired.
Yeah, he did retire. He was one of our landlord representatives. Well, we'll proceed with the minutes. And Norma, you have some corrections to the minutes?
Yeah, on the two sections where I'm quoted, I'd like to change it from Norma Linton reported that most of the Woona neighborhood is in favor of adding more police officers to Norma Linton reported that most of the people she asked were in favor of adding more police officers. And the other paragraph regarding, you know what, Norma Linton added there appears to be a big infestation of rats in her neighborhood, and she has heard that it is all over the city. I'd like that to read, Norma Linton added that there appears to be an infestation of rats in her neighborhood, and that she was told by a professional trapper that this problem existed in other parts of the city.
Okay, is there a motion to approve the minutes as corrected?
I move to, I'm sorry. Esther Pat, I move to approve the minutes as corrected.
Teresa Michelson, I second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed? That motion carries. Okay, we are to public input. We only have one person. Did you want to say something? No. Okay. Okay, we'll move on. We have the problems with rats. I checked with Public Works, and they say there occasionally there's a report of something in the sewers, but they get a professional exterminator to bait them, and so they didn't. People in the neighborhood didn't seem to think it was a widespread problem, but these critters exist all over the world, and they will pop up from time to time. So, is your problem getting better?
May I elaborate?
Yes.
So the gentleman who was on the other side of Teresa's name, I'm sorry, I have forgotten, John asked me, in fact, if it was a rat rather than a mouse. So here's rat number 1, and here is rat number 2. You see right above my kitchen ceiling. I did not take a picture of rat number 3, okay, which was 2 weeks after rat number 2. Okay, so I looked around because you had said something about the sewers, so I thought, okay, I'll look in my basement. And sure enough, the stack pipe that connects from my basement to the sewer had a rat hole chewed in it.
Aha.
So then I called the city and I said, yeah, let's look in the sewers. And they were kind enough, your people here in the city, were kind enough to ask Weldon to come out, and they baited, which you can see here, put big chunks of poison bait in the sewer 6 feet down, and within 5, and at my end and at the block, down the other end of the block, they did the same thing, and within 5 days, all of the bait had been consumed, confirming that, and they saw a lot of evidence of rats, that at least on one block in Urbana, there are indeed rats running through the sewers. So then we decided to test out the activity, and so we put tape over this initial rat hole. And 3 weeks later, yes, the rats had eaten through the tape, demonstrating that they are still wanting to be at Norma's house. And
they like you, Norma.
yes, they do. And so I just want you to know it's not a figment of my imagination. I do have rats. But here's the thing. The first gang of rats, the 3 that we caught, were gnawing loudly since mid-November. So loud, I was plagued by this gnawing. Okay, since we trapped that 3rd rat, there has been no gnawing. But subsequently, another rat chewed through the tape. So these are silent gangs. So all I want to say is you don't necessarily know, because I don't know when that initial hole was chewed. It could have been years, months ago. You don't necessarily know if you have rats. So I would advise everybody to look if they can see where their their stack pipe or their sewer connects, their sanitation system connects with the sewer, just to double check that they don't have holes, because these little critters can be in your house and you not even know it.
Mhm.
Okay, so no, it's not completely over.
But is it better?
Well, it's better insofar as I'm not awakened at 5 a.m. by gnawing. That part is better. But I'm disheartened that after all of that bait was consumed, that still a rat chewed into my stack pipe and is somewhere in the house, I guess. I don't know.
Did they put more bait?
Well, they put a second batch of bait, and that was not consumed so fast, but it took 3 weeks for, the second rat to show up. So Weldon is hoping that the city would allow them to expand into other sewer systems, and I would certainly hope that that can be the case, because surely it's not just my block
Mhm.
that has this issue. So I would hope that Weldon could be allowed or hired to, increase their scope from one little block.
Okay.
All right, that's,
We do rely on people reporting things, but did you
Yeah.
put it out in the WUNA
I
listserv
did.
that people should check?
well, I didn't put that part. I just asked if anybody had rat problems, and no one has rat problems. But that raised the issue of trash, because one person did say indeed that she thought that there was a lot of dumpsters, that it was mostly a rental issue. There were a lot of dumpsters that were uncovered, and she suggested that there be an official, quote, official, unquote, of the city who checks for the dumpsters and the unlidded trash cans, and that the city find the landlords.
Okay, Esther has a comment.
If you want to fine landlords for things that are their fault, that's fine, but there was some discussion on the listserv. It is completely unrealistic to expect the city to go up and down every street to look for trash can lids that are off, or some people were complaining about some other things, snow shoveling. I noticed across the street from me a street light was out, and I, in the morning, like I always, forgot to call it in. I'll see tonight if the homeowners across the street did, but people really need to call stuff in themselves. This isn't that government doesn't care, but there's just no way to find it all. So I think, if anything, the city could put out word that if people have concerns, what number to call, which I know the information is already somewhat available, but I think we need to all put out on our listservs that people need to call in any nuisance things, whether it's trash, trash lids up, dumpsters overflowing, et cetera, because otherwise there's just no way, it's just not realistic to expect anyone to go up and down every street, to find the problems.
We don't
Yeah.
have the staff to do that, and
Yeah.
we do rely on people
Yeah,
calling.
Right.
That's
I
a
also
basic
wanted to say that it's in our neighborhood, anytime anything's wrong, blame the students, blame the tenants, and I really get tired of that. The rats are not the problem of the dumpster, or they be in the dumpster. Rats are in the sewers, and they get into people's homes exactly the way Norma described, where they chew through something, or sometimes there's a problem in the foundation. And and I'm all for better enforcement of, if there's a problem, complaints about garbage. But I don't think that the source of the problem, people give me the address you're talking about, but no, it's just people write to us, because those students don't take care of their garbage because somebody has one location where they saw trash not being handled properly, and I think it'd be much more effective if people would just call in the specific incident, because then it does get taken care of. And a lot of times it's just because, in the big apartment buildings, the landlord doesn't have the trash emptied often enough, and the city has been very effective before when someone's called it in.
Okay, any other?
May I, since
go
you're
ahead.
stating a personal opinion, I'm going to state a personal opinion. I'm not saying that I or anybody necessarily blames the students, but this person who posted, and I find that the landlords are remiss, because I see a lot of trash areas which are not properly, which don't have cans with lids. And so I think that indeed one should tackle the landlords.
Okay, any other comments on this?
I'm
Teresa?
just going to say that you've got to call it in. SUNA has a policy. We have a sheet we put out to our neighborhood association. Kathy had it last time, and she was going to share that with someone. It's got about 10 numbers. Contact. Every annual meeting, I say to people, the city does not have enough staff to take care of driving around up and down, and you need to be the eyes and the ears. That's just what you have to do as a good neighbor. The city is amazingly responsive when you call. Jason Arrowsmith is the environmental control. I just email him. And sometimes I send him a picture, and it works.
Okay. Aspen Court update, is that what you're going to do, Libby? Yeah. Come on up.
Hello.
Hi.
So an update on Aspen Court is in the later stages of being transferred to TWG. They are the affordable housing developer out of Indianapolis that is purchasing the property and working with HUD. The expected closing date as of today is March 10th, so it's just a few days away. They're waiting for one more document back from HUD. I think there's about 140 units at Aspen Court, and as of a report today from the owner, there's about 58 that are currently occupied, so there's several that are vacant, and 48 of those are HUD units. And so those will continue with their contract, and the anticipation would be a complete remodeling of the buildings and retention of the current tenants, and as the units are updated, then the tenants would be able to move into a newer unit. And we're particularly looking forward to the site improvements that are necessary at Aspen Court and have been needed for several years in terms of the campus, as well as the building upgrades. And we are working with TWG on getting the documentation they need to obtain low-income housing tax credits, which will help to fund the renovations. A couple of other updates right in that neck of the woods. We are our staff have been working with HUD on proper format for an income survey. So if you live in the Learman neighborhood in the survey area, you could very well be receiving or perhaps have just received an income survey. Please do respond. We feel that there were errors in the last census that showed it as a higher income area, knocking it out of our target area for HUD funds. So by doing a more detailed survey, we hope to show that it remains a low to moderate income neighborhood, and we can continue to use CDBG and home funds in the Learman neighborhood. So that's what that income survey is about. And finally, since the task force met last time, we've completed a developer selection process with the Housing Authority, who's our intergovernmental partner for the property which formerly had the Urbana townhomes. So that's just north of Aspen Court. And we interviewed 3 development teams and selected an experienced developer in the area, affordable housing developer, Brinshore Development. And Brinshore were the successful developers of Crystal View Townhomes, which is a really nice development, which took the place of the old Lakeside Terrace in North Urbana. They're currently constructing Highland Green, which is just north of that on Kerr Avenue, 33 units, including 9 veterans units. And in other parts of Urbana, they purchased the Florida House Apartments, which is senior housing at Florida and Philo, really, really nice property for seniors, and Sunnycrest Manor, which is on Cottage Grove and is also has a HUD contract for senior housing, and they've upgraded both of those properties. So we've had very good experience with Brinshore. They've been selected to be a developer for hire, so they will do the development, and then there would be a different form of ownership for the units at Urbana Townhomes, but it will be done in conjunction with the city and with the neighborhood, and we hope to have a much lesser density of development there and one that fits in the neighborhood a little better for the long term. They've also, as part of that contract, will be doing some other projects in Champaign County for the Housing Authority. Any questions?
Esther.
3 questions. Did I understand correctly that Brinshore is not going to be the manager of the redeveloped Aspen Court, or are they going to be?
Aspen Court is TWG, and they will be the manager. TWG is a company out of Indianapolis, and they first came to town because they were interested and remain interested in developing market rate housing on the block north of the city building where we are now. Mm-hmm. And they got very interested in the market, and they've actually pursued acquisition of Aspen Court and also the Washington School site. And their affordable housing group is actually been in operation longer than their market rate housing group, so they're very experienced in that.
So what is Brinshore? Now I'm totally confused. What are
Brinshore
they
is
doing with
another
this?
developer.
And what are they doing with all this?
Urbana Townhomes.
Oh,
They
that's
were-
separate.
they're
That's,
on
you're
the
not ready
separate.
with that
Yeah, I
yet.
was just
Oh, I
kind of in
see.
the
All right,
neighborhood, so
sorry.
I switched
Sorry to
from.
take up time.
No, that's
I
fine.
get it.
I started talking about Aspen Court, and I talked about the income survey, and then I moved up to Urbana Townhomes.
Got it.
So.
I see.
Yeah, the city council took a trip to Indianapolis to look at TWG's properties, and it was very impressive. the
I
things
don't doubt
they've
that. The
done.
problem with
Yeah.
all these out-of-town people you bring in is a lot of them are really crummy landlords. And I do hope that, I know that when a new landlord comes to town, you tell them about rental registration and about property maintenance code, but the existence of Chapter 12 and 12.5 of the City Code, Human Rights Act, and the landlord-tenant law are something that about which they are usually oblivious. And we had problem with the developer who was going to be originally was the one who was to do Aspen Court, who owns Gramercy Park in Champaign,
Yeah.
with them not even being aware of Illinois state law. So I would really like to encourage the city to give these folks a little welcome packet that includes all of our laws that pertain to renting, so that they know about it and hopefully will comply without a fight.
I sent all that.
Good,
Because we
thank
talked
you.
a while
Yeah,
about
right,
that,
yeah.
and I did send them the whole, everything,
Good.
those ordinances and a lot of background, and, so we have positive indications,
Good,
and
good.
we will continue to work with them and welcome them, and, I think that they'll do very well, and we think the redevelopment, the renovation of Aspen Court is really long overdue.
Teresa?
So the closing date is March 10th, but is that still dependent on this the loans coming through that the city is helping them with? I mean, if those don't come through?
No, it's not, the city doesn't have a loan on that. There are HUD contracts that exist on 48 of the units, so they are signing off on the sale. And that's in process, and it's not in doubt. So it's very encouraging. And it's taken a long time. There's been a lot of paperwork, but they're heading towards the end of that. There's one more piece yet to come from HUD. They really needed to work hard to retain their contract, and they've been able to do that. Retaining the contract's important because it guarantees revenues for the project. It helps to attract the funding that they're seeking, which is from IDA, the Illinois Housing Development Authority. And it's important from our perspective because it provides affordable housing at a level that is really hard to match. It's a HUD program that was phased out several years ago. It's the same one, essentially, that we have on the senior housing projects, where they hold the rent to 1/3 of your income, regardless of your income, which can be, really beneficial for people on a fixed income.
Any more questions for Libby? Well, it's really good that we're so close to getting a good developer there. You've done some very nice work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are you going to talk about the flyers, or is that John that's going to talk about
Well,
them?
we both were working on this, and we investigated what was sent, and I actually don't have copies, but in the fall, there was a massive handout to, a hand delivery throughout, and mailer throughout the apartments anywhere near campus. It was a very extensive list, hundreds and hundreds of properties. And what they received came from the university. So it was a very dense publication. It had the rules on campus, the rules in the city, even Champaign information, because we worked jointly. And we used to just distribute Urbana information, and the university really wanted to work together with us so that their incoming students would also have information on what the university offers. So we kind of co-opt with them. But the other thing that we've done differently in recent years is we established a page on our website, a landing page, because we realize that students are really more electronic now than they are paper in terms of receiving information. And so this is the landing page, and we printed up more of these little postcards. So we've talked about other types of communications and other letters we can do. But in the meanwhile, if you have, for people in all the different neighborhoods, when you have new neighbors, new students, you know, when they roll over in the new semester or in the summertime, take these cards. We've got hundreds of them. And these can be just kind of like a nice thing to do for the neighbor. Just welcome, here's some information. And then this way the neighbors don't necessarily need to say, hey, did you know you need to cover your trash can? Or did you know you need to bring the trash back in? And did you know that you know, you can't have uncovered alcohol and you can't put couches on the porch and, you know, all these things, you know, that can help them if they would know about it. So it's an educational tool as well as a welcome piece. So we've got tons of these. We can bring them to neighborhood meetings. You can bring them to your neighborhood meetings. And it directs people to the website. So that's the update on the information brochures.
So
And
if you click on fire department or police department, it tells you to dial 911?
Yes, what
Okay.
numbers to dial, the information numbers that Teresa was talking about, many of those will also be on this. And you know what to do in the event of an emergency, fire safety, police. It's kind of a collaborative effort of all the different departments, environmental.
What about social services?
I know we have the tenant union link.
This is really geared towards students, and if
This
it's
is
older
geared
people,
towards
they might not,
students.
you know, they might not be so adept
Yeah,
at
so I think
computers.
we talked about other types of mailers for other populations, and you know, we can certainly adjust or create a different letter or a different brochure, whatever works for that population. Some are going to want the paper information, some want the electronic. So
Because I was thinking of the discussion about people being afraid to call the police, that we're going to have, well, we're going to have our police officer talk about that,
Okay.
but I think maybe it might be nice to have a handout that's geared to the neighborhood and what their particular concerns are. This is really student-oriented,
yeah,
so maybe we
it's
need...
student oriented, but it's for the benefit of the neighborhoods actually, because when
Yeah,
you go
I
to it,
understand, but
it
I'm
helps them live in the neighborhoods more knowledgeably about what their
And
responsibilities
certainly
are.
that's the huge influx of people every year.
Exactly.
But I think there are other, probably different approaches for other neighborhoods.
Oh, yeah.
We probably need to work on that.
Okay.
But anyway, this is good. Yes, go ahead.
So John's got a bunch. If you have however many you need, he'll
We have a
bring around
question
to
over
you.
here.
I was just wondering, are these or the letter that you're formulating currently, are those also going to be available in Spanish? Because a lot of the populations that we're starting to see, I work at Lille, and I work with our dual language program, so a lot of the populations we're beginning to see are in Spanish. So that would be really beneficial for those folks.
I think the one we're talking about certainly should be, we do have some materials in Spanish, but I don't think the student one is in Spanish.
If the student one is for U of I students, it doesn't need to be in Spanish. But for everything else in the community, Megan's right, that's, for everywhere else in the community, there should probably be a Spanish language version too.
There could be Chinese as well, but if you get to the U of I as a student, you're going to know English.
Right.
But there's a lot of other people that come that don't. So,
Can I say, I agree entirely with things for not students. I mean, in my neighborhood alone, there are several families which are adults and are not students, and that's why I like that leaflet so much. And English, I mean, my immediate neighbors are from Syria, and the two older adults in their 50s do not speak English. So I think there's room for some other kinds of information devices.
Sure.
maybe we should talk with every neighborhood association about
Yeah.
what they think would be the most helpful in that neighborhood.
Yeah, I like the idea of a welcome center that's, works for lots of different people. And one thing we've been talking about is being a welcoming community, so we might be able to get some information from that organization, being an immigrant-friendly community, which we are, being a sanctuary city. And I think that might be a good resource for us.
Okay, great. Any other questions for Libby? Very nice job, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're down to crisis intervention team statistics.
Hello. I do have to start by saying I have a phobia of rodents, so I very much appreciated the first 20 minutes of this conversation today.
Okay. We don't think we have any in this building,
I
but
hope
you
not.
never know.
I will be the first one running out if we do. So I've been asked to talk about the crisis intervention trained statistics. And I find when I put a presentation together, I always speak for a long time about stuff you either already know or don't care about, and I'm not answering your questions. So as I go through this, if you have questions, interrupt me. The crisis intervention trained officers, or CIT, is a cadre of officers. We currently have 29 officers of our 57 officers who are CIT trained, or trained, or CIT officers. Of those 29, 21 of those are actually on the street. And what I mean by that is I'm a CIT officer. When I put a uniform on, my officers wonder what's going on. So not everybody is on the street. But of the officers we have, 21 of those are currently working on the street right now in one shift or another. The officers who have not gone through CIT, the CIT officers and the ones who have not gone through CIT have gone through an 8-hour course, which is called Mental Health First Aid for Public Safety. All currently employed officers who are not in Police Training Institute right now at Urbana have gone through that 8-hour course. So everybody on the department, every officer on the department, has some familiarity with recognizing and de-escalating somebody who's in a mental health crisis. One of the things that we do with that ability is we track the individuals who present a behavior. And it's one of the things, when you hear me talk about this, I stress is we don't diagnose somebody on the street. We respond to a behavior. We look for a behavior. We're not, if we know the diagnosis, that's okay, but we're looking for a behavior. And so that behavior could be caused by multiple different things, anywhere from medical to drugs to a chemical imbalance to a mental illness. So we're not going to diagnose what's going on. We're looking at a behavior. And if we see that behavior in an individual, our officers are supposed to fill out a form. And this form gives us a little bit of information of the address the individual lives, the date, time of location, what we did with the individual, what we didn't do with the individual, was anybody hurt, and gives us just kind of a baseline information of what's going on. What I don't have yet, because it just went into the testing process, is if you're not familiar with our computer system, which is called ARMS, there's 5 police departments that add information into ARMS. And because of some changes they just made, we can now take that form, and instead of being exclusive to Urbana, all 5 police departments are now putting information in the same database. So we can also now collect much more information about is the individual homeless, is the individual a veteran, is the individual a U of I affiliated, because if you've got a U of I affiliation, there's so many more resources that are opened up to you. We can now look at the individual's behaviors. We can look at why are we at the call. So that just, Valentine's Day, that just went into action, so I can't give you any stats from that yet. What we're hoping to do is still, each department's feeling it out, seeing what quirks are there, and we're hoping on April 1st to lock everything in, so we'll get 3/4 of the year, we'll get some solid data by the end of the year to know more exactly what we're looking at and what the problem is.
There's a question here.
So probably 3, Urbana, Champaign, and the U of I, and who are the 2 other?
Champaign County and Rantoul. So the big 5 departments.
Is it possible to see what happened in each individual jurisdiction as well?
Yes, we'll be able to run a report for Urbana specific, or we'll be able to get in and run a county-wide report
Okay.
as well. One of the things we do here in Urbana, and the other departments are coming on board with doing this, is currently, if the officer fills out that report, It goes into a binder. It eventually gets put into a Excel spreadsheet. And then if we see that somebody's had 3 or more contacts with us in a short time period, then we assign it to a CIT officer who then has a contact at Rosecrans. And Rosecrans may or may not be able to tell us that the individual is a client of theirs, but we then can communicate with Rosecrans and help push that individual back toward the services that are needed and can help the individual. Yes. I'm sorry, Rosecrans, I used to put it this way, Rosecrans is Community Elements, if you're familiar. They just got, about a year ago, merged with Rosecrans. I used to say Rosecrans, formerly Community Elements, and I stopped doing that, but yeah, it's Community Elements.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So Rosecrans, once you make contact with Rosecrans, do they also give the officers further information to assist the officer in best handling the person in question so that they are treated with the most respect and, if necessary, de-escalated appropriately? Or how does that work?
Our officers, as far as an officer can know, it should already have that information. What we're doing with Rosecrans is, I guess the best I can do is give an example of something we did. And that is we had an individual who, her and her husband we'd gone 4 or 5 times in a row in as many days to domestic dispute. Verbal only, nobody's shoving anybody, nobody's hitting, but they're arguing. And we go 4 or 5 days to that. And on one of the last days we're there, one of my officers that went was CIT trained. And so that officer went beyond the facts of this case and said, why are we coming here every day? Why are we fighting all the time? And the lady said, because my husband won't close the closet door. Well, that seems kind of minor until you realize in her mind that's where the demons were coming from. And so the CIT officer contacted Rosecrans, who they can't tell us this, but we've learned a way to talk to them. She had an appointment about 2 or 3 weeks out with her psychiatrist to get her medication equalized. They bumped that appointment up. They contacted her. We didn't go back. They contacted her. They moved the appointment up, and we never dealt with them again. So that's kind of the stuff we're doing. But now getting more stats, we'll be able to better communicate with Rosecrans, be able to give them better information.
You're doing a lot of crisis intervention.
You guys are making
Much
this easy.
more.
No other questions?
What percent, I think the person who's not here, Kathy Wallig, had a question about how much of your time is used on crisis intervention, roughly.
That's not a stat I can give you. I can tell you that one of the things we teach officers when you're dealing with somebody who's in a crisis is the 2 keys to it is, one, you should be doing whether they're in crisis or not, and that is treat everybody with dignity and respect. Through Mental Health First Aid, we work really hard on destigmatizing mental illness and understanding what it is. So treat everybody with dignity and respect, and the other is slow down. Many of the tactics that we use in law enforcement that are within our policies, considered best practices, approved by the United States Supreme Court, actually escalate a situation instead of de-escalate a situation. And so if officers don't recognize that and they move at the speed we normally move, you can actually create a bigger problem than what you had when you got there. And so a call that might take me, let's go back to the domestic I talked about earlier. That call, we can get in and out of that in 15, 20 minutes with 2 officers if there's not been an act of violence, if it's only been verbal. Once you identify the mental health issue, it could probably take you 45 minutes to an hour to get through that call. And keep in mind that's 2 officers there. So that's 2 officers that aren't available to other calls as they're dealing with that one.
What does training involve, and would you like all your officers to be trained, or
Well,
is that?
the mental health first aid is kind of a 8-hour abbreviation of the CIT. The CIT is 40 hours, so just from a practicality standpoint, it would be next to impossible to get every officer through CIT and then maintain that. Through attrition, you would always be trying to do it. To put on a CIT class is around somewhere between $13,000 and $18,000. So it wouldn't be practical to get every police officer CIT trained. Would I want every officer CIT trained? No, because it's a skill. I want every officer to recognize mental illness when they see it. I want every officer to know and understand how to de-escalate somebody. And I want every officer to know what to do with the individual that they're dealing with and how to hand that individual off who has a higher skill level. But the best way I could describe it here is every medical doctor goes through the same training early on, but then you go into a specialty field. And, do you want every back doctor to also know how to do surgery? No, you want the back doctor to know how to do back stuff. You want the surgeon to know how to do surgery. And I want my CIT officers to have a passion for that. And if the officer doesn't have a passion for it, it's a skill, and they're going to lose it. And so I want officers who really have a passion for what they're doing.
There are some communities that are training civilians in mental health first aid. New York City is doing that, and
Yes.
there are countries that are poor countries that are doing pretty good work on this because they don't have the resources to train people, so they're just training regular citizens.
Correct. The
So-
training we give is mental health first aid that you would get
Mhm.
as a civilian with a supplemental portion of it for law enforcement. So,
Could you say what a Supreme Court decision, you talked about some of them would make it worse instead of better. Can you just give a simple example?
well, if I'm dealing with somebody who's in a state of psychosis, who has armed him or herself with a knife, our practices would be, we come into, say they're standing in the corner of this room over here, we're going to spread out, we're all going to draw down, we're going to order the person to drop a knife, which is effective action if the person is of sound mind and body and is being defiant or has other things going on. But a person in a state of psychosis may not recognize who we are, may not recognize that it's the police who are actually asking them to do something, or may look at that action as, they may recognize I'm a police officer, but they may think of me as somebody who's a risk to their life, and may not have the same faculties. As I train officers, you can have a conversation, but you're not having the same conversation. And so, just because I can do it this way in this circumstance, I might be escalating that.
So what does the Supreme Court decision
Well, I'm
say?
sorry, what I was saying is the Supreme Court would approve that, yes, if you've got a knife, I can point a gun at you. If you come at me
Oh, okay.
with a knife, yes, I can use lethal force. So the Supreme Court has said that's acceptable, but when
May
you
not be
look
the
at
best,
mental
yeah.
health,
Okay.
and in fact, the courts are starting to go more toward if the person's in mental distress, the courts are starting to require us to get trained professionals on the site, or
Okay.
somebody we're cops, we're not crisis clinicians, and that's who we need to have there is crisis clinicians.
Right, and there's a movement to get
Yes.
trained people to go with the police officer. They do that in very big departments, but it's a little out of our reach at this point.
Yes.
Any other questions for Lieutenant Sanders? Yes, Esther.
Would this be the time to ask the question that's not about mental health, but about people calling the police? when they're-
Yes, go ahead. That's one
An
of the
ongoing
reasons.
problem is that people will report to all sorts of other people. I hear the reports to the tenant union about criminal stuff, but they're afraid to call the police, or people often don't report to anyone, they just complain about it afterward, because they don't want the bad guys to know they called. What's the best thing to tell people about how they can tell the police about, mostly it's about drug activity, but someone came to the meeting last month saying that there were some people, aggressive people with dogs, and he just stayed inside when there was going on. How can they call the police and know that it can be really anonymous?
If you call one of our non-emergency numbers, we don't know who's calling from that number. If you call 911, yes, your number pops up. If you call either our front desk at 384-2320 or METCAD at 333-8911, and they will ask you your name because that's what they're trained to do, but you can refuse to give your name. You can give your name and ask to remain anonymous. You can give your phone number and ask to remain anonymous. The only way an officer then is going to contact you is if it's absolutely needed to contact you, but just because they talk to you doesn't mean it's going to make it into a report.
And it's okay to tell people to call the station here, the 3842320?
The only caution I give is if an event is happening
Right.
in front of you, we need to know right then.
And MetCat answers faster and will be more direct.
Well, yeah, because what happens if you call our front desk, you're going to talk to one of our PSRs who hopefully answers pretty quick. But that individual is going to hear what you need, and then they're going to send you to MetCad
Anyway, okay.
anyway. So
All right.
you're elongating the process if you call our front desk.
So how do we get the information out to people that are scared to call the police?
But you just continue to talk to them and say, look, we know people are afraid, don't want to get involved, but we can't solve a problem if people aren't involved. And so, somebody's afraid to go out of their house because they're afraid of the dogs, and we see somebody walking down the street with dogs, we're not going to get out with them, we're not going to know it's a problem. So they can call and ask to remain anonymous. They limit what we can do. So if the person is walking dogs, we might not be able to take any enforcement action because we didn't witness a crime. But, you start limiting what we can do to put people on the crime. But you definitely will get us out. We respond to every call.
So is that the kind of thing that you could have at a neighborhood association meeting?
Yes.
For people?
Yes.
Teresa?
Two things. One is, I think the gentleman, when he talked, said, maybe it wasn't him in particular, but you call and you say, even give your name, but please don't let anybody know, and then the police come like right to the door of the person who called, right? Didn't he mention that? And I mean, there goes your issue of like, oh, it's okay, you're not going to be discovered. So there's that.
I would give two responses to that. One is, it's not a perfect world. So when you call MetCad, you talk to a call taker who types information into a computer, who then in real time as it's getting typed in, or band of dispatchers watching this, what we call a ticket get created, and the dispatcher then starts giving the information to the officer. And so if the dispatcher doesn't read the caller wants to be anonymous part of it and give it to the officer's not going to know that I wasn't supposed to walk up there. The other part of it is sometimes we make mistakes. And what I would say is if the citizen really feels like their rights were violated or they were somehow violated because the officer came to their door, that's something as the patrol lieutenant I want to know about. And I can look in and see what happened, if it was something that we did that we could correct, or if it's something that MetCat did that they need to correct. But we want to make sure our citizens are comfortable communicating with us, and if they're not, then we need to look at how to make that better.
Just, and one more. And so do the sirens go on? Like if someone is reporting like a major fight in their front yard or in the street, I mean, that's also, I think, what the gentleman said. As soon as like someone's called and the sirens go, then the trouble breaks up in many cases, and then there's nothing going on. I mean, do police hit that?
It is a you got to weigh your options. So I don't hit my siren, so then it gets a longer time before I get there. So if somebody's seriously getting hurt in your front yard, somebody's getting beat up, it will delay my response if I'm not hitting my siren. Knowing that I'm hitting my siren may then break up the fight, so I might not be able to capture whoever was doing this, but I've at least stopped the individual from getting beaten on.
So one more. So because the siren allows you to basically break all traffic rules, is that
Well,
what?
we still have to go. We still have to proceed at due caution. So
Okay, but
I still expect my officers to drive a reasonable speed, still slow down or stop at red lights to make sure that the traffic is cleared. They shouldn't be doing 90 down Washington at 6 o'clock in the evening. They still have to drive reasonably, but gets cars to move out of our way. When you kick our lights and sirens on, we've got a traffic light interrupter, so it'll change if we're coming up on a red light, it's going to change it to green for us. So it helps us get down the road quicker. So if we didn't hit that, we'd either have to drive recklessly and then get the complaints of why was the officer driving so fast without his lights on, or we got to drive with the lights and sirens on.
Esther?
Just one suggestion about how to communicate to people about all this, other than the general way, is I think when you have a specific problem, when something's going on in a particular location and you want neighbors to be reporting stuff, is to make a flyer telling them there's a way to contact the police anonymously. I mean, even though it's always true, kind of like it's a special outreach, they're in a problem neighborhood, if you see anything, this is what you do, and just telling them to call MedCAD and decline to give your name or address, and say the City of Urbana said that was okay. And maybe, I mean, it's really just what we're talking about here now, but getting the information directly to the people, because, obviously doing a mailing citywide and all that is, a huge project, and it won't matter anyway because half the people won't see it. But if people at a particular apartment complex know there's stuff going on, just maybe trying to flyer them with that. You can also try talking with MedCAD. I used to send people to the police station rather than MedCAD because they get spoken to better by the Urbana police station than they do by MedCAD. But I see your point about that delays it if they're seeing something going on. So maybe just at targeted times, doing that.
Any other questions for Lieutenant Sanders? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, does anyone have a report from their neighborhood group?
Well, just for Huna, we're meeting again tonight. So I said, I think in the minutes, and I did say it, so I didn't correct it. It was every 2 weeks, but we'll be meeting monthly. And so tonight I'm following this meeting with the group meeting, and I think it's a nice positive thing that will continue for our neighborhood going forward.
Okay. Hi, Megan. You haven't been here for a while.
Hi there. I don't belong to our neighborhood.
Yeah, I was wondering, because UCAN sort of disappeared, right?
Yeah.
UCAP.
Oh, was that what it was called? I didn't
Yeah.
even know it had a name.
Okay.
But
But it's okay if
It-
you
we
can
just-
be a freelancer.
well, thank you. I live in the King Park neighborhood.
Okay.
And I love the neighborhood. I really do. And I would like to thank the city just very much for getting rid of a lot of the questionable housing that was there and having Habitat for Humanity move in. The neighborhood already looks better. But can I just please ask for a little bit more evaluation of that garage on Goodwin and Hill? It's a significant danger, and it's if you want to talk about urban blight, that thing's an eyesore. Kids from King, it is up against King's parking lot, the one across the street on Fairview, and children go on that lot. You can get into the building. The ceiling is caved in. Behind that, on Hill, it's 1118 Hill. The house has caved in. The ceilings have caved in. Kids are still getting on that property. And we're talking kids that are young, early elementary children are getting onto those properties. I've been told, I've talked to the city, several people from the city, that they've both already been condemned. There have been some issues with the landlord. But now, I'm sorry, they've been abandoned for over 20 years.
Here's John Schneider to talk about
Hi,
that.
John.
Hi. That happens to be a project that we've been trying to affect some relief for the neighborhood. The owner is actually the family member of the person, Mr. Harlow, who lived there for years and ran out of the old gas station and had the licensing service and then lived right next door. And basically, we've tried to work with them to locate a bicycle. We've had different projects. Well, we get to the 11th hour, and we have people that are interested in buying. They've offered Habitat. A lot of different people have offered, and she just doesn't seem to want to follow through. So we're most recently working with our legal division. I actually was talking to a contractor to take the owner to court to either force them to demolish or repair. So that's where we're at, and I can't tell you what the timeline is on that, but it's happening very soon.
Okay, just as long as there's a timeline. Again,
Yeah.
the house, it smells, and it's just, the entire roof has begun to cave in, and I don't understand. If there's some sort of limitation of time that somebody can other than just mowing the lawn, she has done nothing but mow the lawn for the 15 years I've lived on Hill Street. And she also owns the property across the street. Well, not directly across the street, but she owns
1114.
No, I'm at 1114. Oh, sorry. I just said that on TV. 1113 has
Oh,
been
I'm sorry,
abandoned
right,
for
1113.
14 years. And again, the only thing I've ever seen happen with both those properties, and I've talked to her directly, is that she mows the lawn. And I don't think that's taking care of your property.
For 1113, we required her, she did do some exterior painting, some exterior maintenance. But it's a similar thing where I think her son lived in that house for many years, then he passed. And so she's just been really, we've tried to work with her in different ways so now we're at the point of taking it to court and asking the judge to make a decision. So.
Do you want to say anything?
No, I have no comment.
Okay. Hi.
No report.
I know what the answer to this will be, call the city office, but someone asked that this especially be brought up. Seems that he's concerned about cars parked all along the north side of Oregon, in front of Leal School, and he considers it a safety issue, and I wrote back to ask him at what time and when, but I didn't get a response, but I'm sure the response will be called the Division of Parking.
Yeah, our parking division does deal with that,
Yeah,
but
he considers.
apparently people keep violating things. So as you know what the answer is, right?
Yeah.
Call the city.
Yeah,
That's always the answer. Yes, go ahead.
Speak to that since
yeah, sure.
that Leal doesn't have any actual parking for the school. And so for us as teachers and other staff and to be able to park and for our substitute teachers to park, we have decals on our cars. And trust me, there was this very brief, few minute period of time when we got new decals and the city was out and a few of us got ticketed. So a lot of, I think, what this person is seeing is just, it's a neighborhood school. There are a large number of students at our school, and there are just a lot of people. So there's just a lack of parking on Oregon in general.
So those cars have decals?
They have decals, or they belong, or their parents picking up and dropping off children. I mean, it's not a perfect situation. We don't have, but our principal, blockades off the two sides of the streets, and you're only allowed to go one way during, I think it's half-hour intervals of time before and after school. And we have crossing guards, so.
Yeah. On the issue of police, one person had an interesting idea. They would like to see officers dedicated to their neighborhood, their communities. They have their own kind of person. Yeah. Well, that was one of the comments. And it's a lovely idea. It's very homey. And
I think Joel Sanders wants to respond to that. Lieutenant Sanders.
Our officers are assigned, we have 5 beats within the city, 6-1 through 6-5, and our officers are assigned permanently to a specific beat. So they do have Runa would be beat 6-3, and you do have at least 4 officers assigned to 6-3. Well, I guess we need to do is get a better job of getting them to your meetings so you can meet them.
Yeah, okay, so we can communicate this and they'll know. So your name would be a contact person for that?
Yeah, if somebody wants to know who's assigned to their beat, they can get a hold of me, and I can get them who their beat officers are.
Good. Okay, and then the other big volume of comments.
Thank you.
24, is about the landmark, Lincoln, Jumers, whatever you call it. And I think probably everyone knows all the issues in terms of ugliness, aesthetics, demolish, rebuild, how it's bad for the businesses in downtown Urbana because, there's not that hotel there to draw them. And one person told me today that Lincoln Square is owned by lawyers and the city should wrest it from the lawyers who are just using it as a tax refuge. Or
This whole
Tax
issue is coming up
write-off?
in March. We're
Yeah.
going to have the new developer give a presentation then.
yeah,
So that ought to answer a lot of questions,
yeah,
I
so
think.
that
Probably
was the
other
main
questions we'll re-raise, but,
main traffic.
do one step at a time.
Okay.
Okay, Esther,
that's it.
you want
Oh,
to say
I
anything
just
from the
wanted to say,
tenant union standpoint?
No, actually, I just want to say about the police, that
Okay.
every time I have ever called the police, even when the Metcat dispatcher said, well, I don't know when someone's going to be able to come out, which they do too often, the officer pulls up in front of the house while the Metcat dispatchers tell me we don't know how long it'll be. I'm just amazed at how quickly Urbana police respond, just anytime they're called. So, and that's been the case for a long time. I'm real happy about that.
Okay. Well, next month, we're going to try to have a tour so you can see some of the problem properties that we've dealt with that have been turned around. So that will be when it's light out. This will be when daylight saving time, so we can see things. So if you have any other topics that you want to discuss, let me know. But we could, I think, learn something just by going around the city and seeing some of the key things. We're not going to go to every one of them, but we'll pick out a few that we can do in an hour. Okay? Well, thank you all for coming, and we'll adjourn the meeting. Right, it'll be a tour, so you'll see hands-on, well, not hands-on, but maybe out the window or get off the bus. What the kind of, we'll talk about the problems and what the various cities departments did, because they do a team effort to solve the problem and turn it around.